non-fiction collaborating and so on, but I'm not sure whether there's that demand, really, on the part of the authors to give up that total power, to let other people have a go at it. And I'd like to know from people who've had a go about how that's working out and what the authors' views seem to have been.
I was just thinking when you were talking that there is something about fiction and non-fiction, and because I suppose I'm wondering when you were talking kind of where story is in that, but maybe that it's more about. This is just maybe me projecting, but that is what you said seemed more like, you know, it's about power relations, which can have a multitude of stories within it. So I suppose, and I write fiction as well, so I think, and I'm sitting in my shed for days on end trying to make this novel work as a piece of work, and I don't know. I just wonder whether non-fiction lends itself more, or maybe not. I don't know.
Well, it made me want to do a similar project with fiction. Okay. And I mean, the last question about collaborative writing, I mean, you were involved in the 24-hour book, which left me feeling much more excited about the potential for collaborative writing than I had before and I was expecting. And actually the Unlive, which is the other project we've been doing, trying to create a sort of community of readers and writers which are a little bit more cohesive and digitally minded than before, just so to try and create a really kind of rich setting for experimenting with collaborative writing in digital publishing forms, which at the moment are very hard for people to get their heads around, both as readers or writers. You know, how do you begin to think about making something so that you might broadcast to the world, or reading something like that? And yet the idea of a few people in Crouch End thinking, well, you know, you can do websites, I could write this bit, you could write that bit, we could send episodes and then all meet up at the library cafe at the end of it, you know, somehow seems I can get my head around that. And then thinking, and if that worked, then you could use this local hub and you could then promote this thing to the world. You know, there's no reason why you shouldn't suddenly be sending this thing out to a much, much wider community. And that's, to me, a very important part of the sort of creation side of it all, the sort of curated community that makes things.
I'm getting slightly lost of all the different strands around, and I suppose another aspect is I'm wondering whose community and what does the community consist of, because I'm sure we all have different notions of either what our community or what the shared community might be, but also culture, like whose culture and whose shared culture. Like, you know, I'm sure we all have different assumptions in this room, and I suppose I'm wondering, like, as well, maybe it's also that idea of designated or even relegated roles in terms of we probably have notions of what, you know, perhaps a fiction writer or a non-fiction writer or a poet might do in terms of, you know, their day-to-day kind of craft, but do we really know what curators are capable of doing? Because to me it's a newer role, and the reason I particularly like it personally is because it gives rise to innovation, it gives rise to perhaps turning the notion of curator in museums on its head and applying it in quite a utilitarian way, but hopefully an artistic way as well, to literature, and doing something different, you know, and possibly pushing boundaries. So I guess responding to kind of your comment about authorship, I also think that curators, if they wish to, can foster multiple authorships, and it doesn't just become about their role, or, you know, it depends, I think, what you're coming into all of this for and what you want to get out of it, I think.
So did anybody hear Ben Hammersley's British Council lecture earlier this year as a science writer? And he gave a talk, it's on YouTube, as I say, he gave a talk for the British Council, their annual lecture, about, his argument is that we're in a time when we're moving from hierarchies to networks. And the problem is that people that take decisions grow up in hierarchical societies and they don't understand what networks are. And interestingly, for the British Council lecture, his suggestion is that you kill everybody that grew up in a hierarchical approach, but it seems to me, which I think is a bit drastic, but
time will take care of that.
Yeah,
but it seems to me, you know, if we're talking about authors and curating, they both represent power relationships that come out of hierarchical societies, and we're moving into a set of network opportunities. So I think the tension I've already picked up here is that same thing that Ben Hammersley is talking about, is that the stuff that Chris is talking about that I'm interested in is how do we use the network affordances to do things differently. That the process of curation is a really interesting process. It doesn't have to be in the power of the person who's the chief curator of the museum. It may be something that we learn in order that we learn to aggregate resources differently, to put our own spin on, become co-creating authors rather than only accepting. I love authors. I've got a book full, or Kindle full of books here, all by great authors, and I love that. But actually, that seems to me that it would be nice to be in a situation where a really good author comes out of the co-creation process, because you see that they curate better than other people, rather than that we look for the single great writer who is the person that we revere, usually.